You're putting it in the cloud.
Okay, hello everybody. This is Dick Price and Sharon Kyle from the LA Progressive, and we're honored to be here today with Jeffrey Sterling. Hello, Jeffrey, how you doing?
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
So Jeffrey is a lawyer and former CIA employee who was convicted of violating the Espionage Act for revealing details about a covert operation to supply Iran with flawed nuclear warhead blueprints to journalist James Risen. In 2015, you were sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. But your battle against the government had begun more than 15 years earlier when you were still at the CIA. After you lodged a racial discrimination complaint, you were eventually fired by the agency, and then you filed 2 federal lawsuits against it, one for retaliation and discrimination, another for obstructing the publication of your autobiography. You also spoke as a whistleblower to Congress. That experience then left you almost homeless, it's reported, until you could return to your hometown near St. Louis and rebuild your life, meeting your wife and landing a good job, but only to be arrested and imprisoned years later. Is that pretty much accurate as far as it goes?
Yeah, that's the roller coaster that has been my life. Yes, I think you encapsulated quite well.
Yeah, so that's for what we'll be covering. So the first question, I'll start and then Sharon can have one. What parallels can you draw between your treatment by the US government and its current treatment of Julian Assange?
I think it shows that the US government will go to any lengths to quiet dissent or to retaliate against those who have not shown the US government in a favorable light. The government does not like its dirty little secrets to be out there in the public, especially if the government hasn't leaked that information itself. So going after me was an act of retaliation. I had the nerve to stand up to the CIA, who told me as a case officer, trained case officer, that I was a security risk because I stood out as a big black guy speaking Farsi. I stood up against them. I sued them in court. I was ready to go, ready for the fight, and the court system deemed that me, a black man standing up for his civil rights, was a threat to national security. And I still have trouble wrapping my head around that concept. But that established, I think, the CIA mechanism, the government mechanism to go after me. That allowed them a free hand to persecute me and eventually unfairly and illegitimately prosecute me. I think they're doing the same thing with Assange. They're denying him any so-called rights that they may guarantee him. But he voiced issues that the US government would rather not be out in the public eye. So therefore, he has to be a target. He has to be quieted, and he also has to be made an example of. And I think that is exactly more of the motivation in my persecution. They had to make an example of someone who stands up to them. And I think that's exactly what they're doing with Assange.
Said. So I have to admit, and I would guess that this is true of you, that when Barack Obama was sworn in as President of the United States, it was a thrilling experience. How do you feel knowing that the Obama administration—
It was.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, yes, I was absolutely thrilled. I honestly did not expect to see an African-American elected president of this country. I was absolutely thrilled. Me and my wife, Holly, actually had tears that night that he was declared the winner. Little did I know at that time that I had voted for the man who would eventually put me in prison for his witch hunt on whistleblowers, an unprecedented witch hunt on whistleblowers. He had them targeted from the beginning of his presidency till the end. And that sort of energy to quiet dissent, to go after whistleblowers has continued. Barack Obama set a horrible precedent for truth. Whistleblowers are all about truth. And I think it's just unfortunate. That's an aspect of his presidency that I think not many people know about. But I think it is actually an underpinning of his entire administration.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard, as a Black person who celebrated the success of this first time and only time of a Black man being elected, and then to see the use of the Espionage Act
Yes.
in the way that, to the best of my knowledge, had not been used. That initially it was written for spies.
Absolutely.
Spies and not to be used against government workers or whistleblowers, or to in any way degrade whistleblower protections. That was shocking to me. And I've always wondered why. I mean, do you have any guesses as to why it was the Obama administration that exceeded all other presidents in their use of this very aggressive attempt to silence whistleblowers?
I'm not sure if there will ever be an exact answer to that, but I think as technology has continued to grow, more voices are out there and more people are listening via the internet, social media. And I think the government has always felt that as a threat. The Obama administration was one of appeasement, I believe. They were going to appease whatever faction there was in the government to be liked and to get his agenda through. I think there had been rumblings, of course, about using the Espionage Act to possibly go after reporters. And I think the Obama administration embraced that as a tool. And why? Because it's an effective tool to use. It allows the government to hide evidence that it will use against you. You're hamstrung with the Espionage Act. I think it's a win-win situation. For who have been charged under the Espionage Act have eventually pled to violating whatever aspect of that act that they're being charged with. I, on the other hand, I refuse to plead guilty to something I did not do. And so it was me against that machine that they had put in place, that they had energized to go after whistleblowers and go after dissent. And I think in my instance, with the Obama administration, what you must understand is that, again, you had mentioned earlier that my ordeal had started 15 years earlier. Well, it was under the Bush administration. The FBI was investigating the supposed leak that I did to a reporter. They came up with nothing. The FBI actually dropped the case, and they said so during my eventual trial. But then so they dropped my case. Again, there was no evidence. Come the Obama administration, I think as a way to show its abilities, to show its strength, reinvigorated the case, reawakened the case against me with no additional evidence, yet to them, they were successful in prosecuting me, which was more of a persecution. And I think it was easy. I think they saw it as an easy avenue for them to take against me. Here's a Black man fighting against the CIA. I didn't look like any of the CIA officers that were put on the stand. And I think it was also an aspect of the Obama administration, especially Eric Holder, trying to show that they're not going to show any favoritism to African Americans. So therefore, they were not going to be lenient on me. And they certainly proved that out. So it was not only, I think there was so many things about my situation that was helpful for that administration, or at least they perceived it as being helpful. The war on whistleblowers, and maybe a sort of self-styled legitimization that they're trying to put forward to the American public.
So one thing that's surprising about your case and John Kiriakou and Julian Assange is the relative silence of mainstream media. The cases draw some coverage, but this is a direct attack on the First Amendment and on press freedom and on the ability of reporters to gather information and inform the public about what the government is doing in its name. So why do you think mainstream reporters give this such a pass?
I think no, especially the mainstream media, doesn't want to get on the wrong side of any presidential administration, because then they're going to lose access. For me, even during my trial, it was shocking how mainstream media really had no interest, especially early on, pre-trial activities. There was more concern for the reporter that I allegedly leaked information to. It got such to the point, and that reporter was James Risen. It was no longer the USA versus Sterling to the mainstream media. It was the Risen case. He was in no danger of going to prison. They could have called him as a witness. He said he would have gone to jail, but the administration chose not to do that. So the interest for mainstream media was self-serving. They wanted to protect their own. And there was really little regard for whether I was innocent or guilty. And once the danger was over with Mr. Risen, any interest in my case had dissipated completely. And I think that shows a disingenuousness of the mainstream media. There's more out there to be reported. If you're going to be fair-minded and report on things equally across the board, then you have to take things from all different angles. You have to show the perspectives and show the truth, not just your own self-serving interest of what you want to put out there to America, and be afraid of what an administration will do if you reveal the truth. I think my case should have garnered more attention because of the implication of an administration using the Espionage Act to go after reporters. I think my case actually established the groundwork for them to be able to do so. And the result of that has been the attack on Julian Assange.
That's right. Thank you. So yes, you're right about Julian Assange and the Espionage Act being used against a reporter. I want you to talk a little bit, for those who aren't going to read, but are just going to look at this video. Let's just give them a little bit of background of what you allegedly did in relation to Operation Merlin.
Yes, with the CIA, I was an Iranian expert. I was a clandestine case officer. And I was selected to participate or be a part of the Operation Merlin, which was designed to the purpose to thwart the Iranian efforts to gain a nuclear weapon. The idea of the operation was that I would place someone in a position to turn over plans to a nuclear weapon, an item, a crucial item of a nuclear weapon to the Iranians. Unbeknownst to the Iranians, these plans would be flawed, and flawed in such a way that no one could detect them. So I trained the go-between to seek out Iranians, how to approach them. We were at the stage of launching the operation. And the moment that the go-between saw the plans, he immediately saw the flaw. And all sorts of alarms went off in my head, in that if he can see it, then the Iranians are certainly going to see it as well. And the nature of science, if you already know that something's wrong, you're going to try to fix it. So what I saw, instead of thwarting the nuclear ambitions of Iran, we would actually be speeding up their advancement to gain a nuclear weapon. I made my concerns known to my direct management, to management above them. And the response was essentially, shut up. And I did eventually take my concerns to the Senate Intelligence Committee to give them my, I expressed my concerns about the operation, the danger that it could pose to our US troops, because this was around the time we went into Iraq. The response there seemed at the time, they expressed interest and concern. But as I learned during the trial, they did absolutely nothing with that information except go directly to the CIA with it. So eventually I was accused of leaking information related to that operation with no proof, no evidence presented at trial or at any other stage during this entire proceeding. And I was eventually convicted of violating the Espionage Act on no evidence.
So to sum it up, you saw a flaw in a program that was about to be launched. You brought this to the attention of your superiors.
Yes.
You testified about the flaw in a Senate hearing. And
just to Senate staffers as a first phase to get to the Senate, yes.
And then in response, and as your reward, you were penalized.
Absolutely.
I see.
I think one interesting thing in showing how the target was always on me and never on anyone else during any so-called investigation. One of the Senate staffers that I gave explicit details about the operation to, and that is the sort of thing that individuals in the intelligence community are allowed to do. The Senate Intelligence Committee and their staffers have the clearance to hear this information. One of those staffers was actually, subsequent to my visit, was actually fired from the Senate Intelligence Committee for leaking classified information, and actually leaking classified information to the same reporter that I was accused of leaking classified information to. So there was no investigation of anyone else. There was no concern about who could have done this other than prosecuting me, setting me up as an example, and showing their strength as the government can do what it wants, sort of thing.
So some of your original problems with the CIA circled around racial discrimination. You were overlooked for promotions, you were sidelined, you were one of the very few Black agents or analysts. Do you have any sense that that institutional racism has improved at the CIA or any place else in the government subsequent to whatever it was, almost 20 years ago?
I don't have any insights into the organization to this day, but just knowing that type of organization, and the CIA sits sort of up on a hill onto its own, I would doubt that the racial situation at the CIA has changed. No one has lobbied as a politician to clean up the CIA. I mean, when was the last time a politician, that was their election platform, to clean up the intelligence community or the CIA? And the CIA has a position of intimidation, secrecy, of course, but no one's willing to challenge it, because those bodies that are empowered with challenging the CIA, with keeping them in check, the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, they don't do their jobs. In fact, the CIA goes out of its way, and I know this from my experience, goes out of its way to staff those institutions with their people. So instead of having a line to the Senate Intelligence Committee, the actual members of the committee, if you go testify to either of those committees about wrongdoing at the CIA or any aspect of the intelligence community, it's going to be a direct line right back to the CIA, as opposed to the so-called protections that whistleblowers are supposed to have. So they are very self-protective, very slow to change. And I really doubt that that the situation would be any different now than it was when I was an officer there.
Oh, I have to say that doesn't surprise me. So I was reading an article about the impact that this whole thing has had on your wife, her being questioned for what, in excess of 8 hours,
Yes.
and taken and having an impact on her ability to perform her work as a social worker.
Yeah.
I noticed in the article I was reading that it talked about her going to her attorney and talking to her attorney, and it occurred to me, well, where did she get legal representation? Did that have to come out of your pocket? How?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That had to come out of our pocket. And it was really difficult to find an attorney who would have any familiarity with, we're in the Midwest, to find an attorney who would have any familiarity with dealing with these sort of issues, with classified issues and things like that. We were very fortunate to find a very capable and competent attorney to represent Holly through the grand jury process and other aspects of this horrendous ordeal that we had gone through for so many years. But that does show another aspect that makes it difficult for people to stand up against, say, the Espionage Act or any other aspect of classified U.S. government issues. Finding an attorney who has the clearance. And okay, they can clear an attorney, but the government will take so much time to clear that person. And meanwhile, some sit in jail. I had so many instances where the CIA would not clear an attorney. They would take their sweet time about it, and not give any reasons as to why. The reason as to why is just to wait out people, to extend things as long as possible. I was running into that sort of situation when I filed my original racial discrimination suit against the agency. Being a lawyer myself, I actually filed pro se on my own. That did not make the agency happy, but I followed all of the classified rules, and I knew my case certainly, and I was an attorney, licensed attorney, so there wasn't much they could have done about it. But how many people have that opportunity going up against the government? Not many.
So many people might not know this, but you had to go to the EEOC initially to even get permission to sue. So the EEOC must have had sufficient evidence that you weren't just summarily dismissed in your original allegations of racial discrimination and retaliation.
Yeah. Well, actually, the process was you have to go through the internal EEOC process of whatever government agency you're a part of. If the decision then is unfavorable, at the level I was, you could either go to the overall EEOC commission to pursue your actions there, or you could go to federal court. Given the experience that I had with the internal EEOC at the agency, I really had no inclination that I would receive any sort of fair treatment at the EEOC. So I went directly to federal court. Feeling that I would have more of a chance, more of a fair chance to proceed in my racial discrimination claims. And
so the outcome of that was in federal court. Do you want to talk about?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Talk about what the outcome was.
What happened, I filed in New York. That was my last posting in the CIA, and where the final straw had struck for me and the discrimination that I faced. I filed in New York, which you're supposed to file in the district where it happened. The New York courts said that this is a bona fide case of racial discrimination and it should go forward. The government is able to game the system. They were able to go venue shopping. The government then moved to have the case transferred to the Eastern District of Virginia, which is the government's backyard, if you will. Once my discrimination case was there, that court immediately granted the government's motion to dismiss on the grounds of national security. It's just amazing. Here, what is the law in this country? Is it only dependent upon what one judge in one area determines and one judge in another area may not agree with? For me, it was incredible. And the whole reasoning, it wasn't that I didn't face discrimination. It was that I was a threat to national security. I'm still not angry about that whole situation, but really dismayed that that sort of situation can continue in this country unabated.
So basically, the issue of discrimination was not adjudicated because of national security issues. And
Absolutely.
so therefore, you get no remedy.
None, none. And continuing from there, the exact same things that would have been discussed and disclosed during my discrimination trial happened during my Espionage Act trial. But I wasn't allowed to go forward for national security reasons, but for national security reasons, they prosecuted me and prevented me from talking about anything related to my discrimination case. And the other interesting thing is that trial, again, in the Eastern District of Virginia, revealed more classified information than my discrimination trial ever would have. I was amazed. I used to work in the Office of General Counsel at the CIA. The amount of classified information and sources and methods that were freely revealed during that trial was astounding to me. We had a deposition from an asset and his wife, noting that we were working with the national labs on the plans, the type of structure, how operations are put together. All of that information was disclosed by the US government. Yet I couldn't talk about the discrimination that the US government does. That was more of a threat than what they revealed about clandestine operations.
So as I said in the introduction, I mean, when you were initially fired from the CIA, you were pretty disheartened, you were pretty down and out, and you went home to Missouri to rebuild your life. You met your wife, you got apparently a good career, a good job going again, but then you're imprisoned. So how well have you landed on your feet this time? And is this cloud still hanging over your shoulder?
It is a bit. It's been very difficult to find, if you say, a traditional job. Having to check that box of convicted felon has a very chilling effect on a job search. But for me, I found other projects, other things to do to keep me busy. But I always maintain hope, and I've had a wonderful support system, mainly the support from my wife, Holly, who's been there throughout for me. And it has been quite difficult. But for me, every day I wake up knowing that I did the right thing, that I stayed true to myself, and that they didn't change me, they didn't break me. They did not win. They may have put me in prison, but my spirit, my mind, all that is me has remained. And that's a lot of that is thankful to the tremendous support that I've received. When I was in prison, so many people that I did not know were writing me letters. And those are the most uplifting things that you can receive in a desolate situation like prison. And that gave me fuel to continue. That helped me get through writing my book, and just being okay with that. That was in my, all of that was in my past, but I stayed true to myself.
So evidently you're a strong man and you were able to withstand these pressures. But the next person that's in your shoes at the CIA or the FBI and comes across flawed information that could damage the country, they're going to have a chilling effect on what's done to you, Kiriakou, Assange. The next person is going to be quiet.
I think the goal, certainly in the whistleblower persecutions, has been that chilling effect. But there are people who know right from wrong. There are people who know that something is devastatingly wrong for this country, that lies are perpetrated, that danger is conducted by our country in illegal manners. And despite the track record of going after whistleblowers, people of conscience are still going to come forward. That's what makes our country and our nation great. Without whistleblowers, there could be such a free hand and unabated hand for the government to do whatever it wants. And there's always going to be someone of conscience that stands up to that, knowing the risks that they will undertake by standing up to the government and saying no. So I don't think they're ever going to stop people coming forward with the truth, because that is what it's all about, is truth. And do what they can, whatever administration, whatever Department of Justice, do whatever they can to hide truth. There are those who are going to believe in it and continue to operate in it and come forward with it.
Well, I hope you're right about the whistleblowers, but speaking of right and wrong, you no doubt saw the recent Michael Isikoff story about the high-level discussions at the Trump White House with the CIA director at the time, Mike Pompeo, and a bunch of other high-level CIA people talking about assassinating or kidnapping Assange. Were you surprised, or is that run-of-the-mill activity in the White House and at the CIA?
Oh, I was not surprised at all. I think that was a grand example of the machine that goes into action at the CIA and administrations when there is something out there they want to hush, they want to quiet. For me, in my example, there was so many departments at the CIA that were focused on following me, putting their case together against me, watching everything that I did, in their PR areas, in the operations areas, and things like that. That's the machine that goes into effect at the CIA, particularly when a threat to their autonomy comes up. Assange has presented that. That machine jumped into action, and that report from Isikoff is the example of what the CIA is and what it has done. It's more concerned with protecting its own image, keeping its own secrets hidden, as opposed to protecting this country. So I was glad that that sort of article is out there, because it shows exactly what the CIA has been about and how administrations can be supportive of that.
It's interesting that you say it's more interested in protecting its own image, because it seems to me that your case or your charges of racial discrimination and retaliation, and the fact that you went and spoke with Senate staffers about a flaw in a program that was about to be launched, both of those allegations show that the agency is not perfect. But rather than take that information and try to fix things, they prosecute you. Is that right? Is that basically what happened here?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Absolutely. Protective of itself, opposed to protect. I think that is just self-evident in the reports that we see, like the most recent one about activities at the CIA.
So during this last presidential election, for the first time in my memory, talks of institutional racism and even the word reparations. I remember in one of the presidential debates, then presidential candidate Marianne Williamson brought up the topic of reparations, and then all of the other candidates also started talking about reparations. How do you feel about the turn that this country is taking? Does it seem to you that it's perhaps more performative than really taking significant steps to change?
I think there was the opportunity to take significant steps to change during the Obama administration. There was such positivity and hope that came out of his campaign. And I think he summarily let everyone down, went his own way once he was president. When Donald Trump came in, I think there was a bit of a revealing of what the real America is with that man as president. There was a line from Jimmy Carter's wife during the campaign against Reagan. And she said that about Reagan and his rhetoric, he makes people comfortable with their prejudices. And I think that is exactly what Trump brought to not only government, but also to this country. And I think that was more of a regression than doing nothing during the Obama administration. And I think people felt freer to express their biases and feel proud about it, with no accountability being called in. How many times was Trump held accountable on the horrible things that he would say, particularly with regard to race? No one in his administration would hold him accountable. No one. The mainstream media certainly did not. And I think the reason Biden, I think there's a clamor to get back to at least having hope that there can be change. So that has led to the embrace of Biden and his victory in the election. I am suspicious of Biden as well, because he was part of that administration that persecuted me and that did nothing, I think, with regard to race in this country. But if any silver lining can be found out of the Trump administration, is that there was that revealing, there was essentially the hood coming off, if you will, to show America what is really there. And the January 6th horrible event, I think also showed the world the lie that America talks about equality. A majority white crowd was able to just walk into the US Capitol. If that had been a Black Lives Matter demonstration, they wouldn't have been able to get anywhere near the Capitol. So I think that showed our racial issues in this country. Trump revealed them, and maybe now seeing all of this, feeling it and realizing it, maybe steps can, in a positive way, can happen again, as opposed to lip service from, say, the Obama administration.
I hope so. But Biden is still pursuing extradition of Julian Assange.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, there's the question, why? I mean, there's also the question, why is he still in Belmarsh prison? It's a situation of the US and the UK trying to find a common ground to go after what may be perceived as a common enemy. And none of it makes any sense. None of it has been fair. What I found absolutely disgusting is during some of the proceedings there, the US government used my case as a benchmark, using my name as a benchmark for the type of sentence that Julian Assange would receive. I found that incredible that they would use a trial that was a travesty of justice as an instance or an example to show how Julian Assange will receive a fair chance in America. I wished I could have been there to refute all of those claims by the government. Again, the UK is not wanting to face the truth, just like the US is. And there is the common enemy of Julian Assange. And I'm still, actually, I feel a bit responsibility for, if I had been victorious in my trial fighting the Espionage Act, then maybe the government wouldn't have been so eager to use that very act to go after Assange. Because a lot of the groundwork for them going after Assange was laid during my trial. And so there's a bit of I have a lot of emotion about what has been happening to Assange and the claims that the U.S. government are saying about the treatment that he would receive. I've been down that road. If he is extradited, I've been down that road where he would be heading, and he doesn't have a chance.
Mhm. Will you talk a little bit about your experience after you were incarcerated, what those months or years were like for you?
They were horrible. It was a living nightmare for me each and every day. One of the biggest, if not only, fears I had growing up always was being put behind bars, having my freedom taken away from me. That was very, very difficult for me being there. There is nothing corrective about any correctional institution in this country. Prisons are merely body warehouses, human warehouses where people are just essentially, you're given a number, placed in on a shelf and left there. You no longer have rights. You will be, and it's also a system of continual punishment. But as I said earlier, what helped me get through, first and foremost, was being able to speak to my wife, being able to email with my wife, even though I know, of course, everything's being monitored, but having that connection with her. And again, the thousands of people who wrote me, sent me books, those sort of things kept me going. And also, you try to have a purpose wherever you are. And for me, that was being a tutor. I was a tutor while I was there, assisting individuals get their GED. And I found that very fulfilling. So that helped me get through the days, the months, and the eventual years. That sort of situation, you got to look beyond what you're surrounded by and have faith in what could be or what's out there waiting for you. For me, that was the strength that I needed and held on to get through that situation.
So you've written a book about your travails, your exploits, Unwanted Spy, the persecution of an American whistleblower. What's been the reception, and do you plan to do a follow-up?
The reception actually has been pretty good. I had some very good reviews for the book. I was on a book tour to get word out there about it, but then COVID sort of threw a wrench into any further activities with that. But I think, in a, again, self-serving way, I think it's a very good book. It's a book about America. I think more so than just about a Black man in the CIA or just about whistleblowing. Those are all American aspects. And I think this book shows a journey that anyone in this country could take, and how they grow and what they experience, and the different types of Americas that there is in this country, and also learning about the CIA. So I think it's a very good book. With regard to follow-up, I've been toying around with the idea of writing a book about my prison experience. I think that could be pretty interesting to write. And if anything, much like my first book, I think there's a catharsis that I can gain from it to help me sort of close that door and leave it in the past.
So I was reading that you had attempted to write your memoirs, but were stopped.
Yes.
Is there any way for you to bring that back and get that published?
Well, actually, that is my memoir is Unwanted Spy.
I see.
I had written a book when I was still at the agency, of course, on my way out the door. And as a rule follower, as I had established during my career at the agency, I went through the Publications Review Board because they want to make sure there's no classified information being revealed. At that time, I finished the book, submitted it to them, and they had issues with it. And I could understand wanting me to take things out or word my way around certain issues, but they wanted me to outright lie in my book. The best example of that is when I was stationed in New York, they wanted me to affirmatively state that every morning in New York, I got up, took the train to Washington, D.C., had my staff meetings there, and then returned to New York. And I was not going to lie in my book. And I brought an action against them to stop them from making me essentially write a lie and publish a lie. That case, I had to eventually drop that case because I ran out of money at that time. But when I got out of prison, I immediately jumped back into finishing that book. I finished it, updated it because it had been old and it needed updating. And then once again, I submitted it to the Publications Review Board. There were many things that they had issues with. And again, they wanted me to make changes. They don't like to discuss locations and things like that. So I promptly submitted the trial transcript to the Publications Review Board, stating that anything that I've talked about in my book was already revealed freely by the US government during my trial. It only took maybe 2 months for me to gain approval for my entire book, and that's unheard of for individuals who are wanting to write books. Of course, unless you're a high-ranking official, you don't even submit your information to the Publications Review Board. But I essentially threw their own moves back in their face, and I was able to publish my book.
Wow. But asking you to insert these lies, do you think that that was setting the stage for them to change venue?
Oh, absolutely. And the reason for wanting to change venue, of course, is stating that, and this is how they venue shop and lie. They said before the court that all of my personnel decisions, all of my work assignments all those decisions were made in DC, and that was completely false. But the courts bought it. And that's why they were allowing them to change venue. But that sort of aspect as well, the CIA does not like to disclose locations. So yes, that would have been supportive. That would have supported their venue move. They want everything in the Eastern District of Virginia. That is a very conservative court. They rarely go against the government in these instances. And I essentially would say that the CIA has that court in their back pocket.
Wow. Well, I have to say that I'm so sorry, that you experienced this, but I'm so appreciative of your willingness to be open and honest and to share, because, you're saving people's lives. So many of us, especially Black people, are not as aware as we should be of how, we tend to, some of us think that, well, all we have to do is, go to school and do all the right thing and everything will be okay. And it most certainly is not okay.
Yeah. I'll say I certainly had that viewpoint. And I did have an awakening many times through my life in different phases and stages of my life. But, I believed in that aspect. I believed in America enough to stand up and fight against those un-American sort of viewpoints. And I think if people, especially young people, question, have questions, don't fall into the categories people want to place you in. You find your own category and you do your own thing. And that's essentially what my book is about. I didn't bow to where I was supposed to be as an African American in this country. I didn't bow to what I was supposed to be to white America. I followed myself. And I think if we have more of that, and we're all capable of following our own path, then I think the truth is going to matter more. And there's going to be integrity, and just things will be real. I guess, if you will, that's the best way I can come up with this. And that if you're honest, everything's going to work out okay.
Well, I hope you're right, but it's currently looking like the stage is being set for an outright assault against independent journalism. And if they're successful with Assange.
Yeah, I believe that as well. Again, I think the groundwork for that was because there was an appeal during my trial. And during that appeal, the government, because it was a gray area before then, whether the government could go after, try to prosecute reporters. But my case, that appellate decision that the court won, because they wanted to ask the reporter any question they wanted to, the judge refused. So they went to appeal, and that court, again, the Fourth Circuit, if you will, decided that there is no protection. The government can go after a reporter just like anyone else. And that forever established, I think, what the government can use, and especially with regard to the Espionage Act. So yes, I think the war has already started, and especially mainstream media is going to have to step up and do something, or they'll just be forgotten, I think, because there are so many other avenues out there reporting that maybe they're making those institutions that kowtow to administrations more irrelevant than they need to be.
Well, we deeply appreciate you taking this hour to talk to us. We look forward to working with you in the future, and we'll share you any links for how we use this interview. Thank you so much, Jeffrey.
All right, thank you.
Thank you again.
Thanks so much.
Have a great day.
Hope that was okay.
It was wonderful. It was very good.
Wait, don't leave yet.
Okay.
Take off the record, honey.